Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Scale series, and with me on the line is Philip Dutton, the CEO of Solidatus, doing some cool stuff in the data space and have scaled to quite an impressive number. So we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of that in a moment. But Philip, for our viewers around the world who haven't heard about what you guys are doing, please could you give us a bit about your company, your customers, problems, the problem that you solve, and that kind of thing, and then we'll get into the detail.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks very much, Matt, for having me. So Solidatus, really, we're a data management company, and what does that really mean? We help organizations manage the data that they have, and really to help them make decisions from that data. And it probably sounds a little bit obscure and a little bit kind of dry, but actually, if you think about the world, everyone is driven by data now. Everyone really needs to understand their data to deliver for their clients, to avoid getting fined. And I think the biggest probably secret is no one really realizes that we've got this systemic and endemic data complexity problem. If you look at some of the fines that have been dished out just around GDPR, there's more than 2 billion that have been handed out across 4 or 5 companies. So your Facebooks, your Googles, your WhatsApp, your Amazon, Instagram. And these are meant to be the organizations which are the shining light in technology and data. And yet they can't even manage your data, understand where it is, how they're using it, what they're using it for. So it really is a problem for every organization at scale.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of scale are you guys at the moment? Like, could you share some information for our audience just to paint a picture of like where you guys are at scale wise?
Yeah, certainly. So Solidatus is now just reaching about 120 people globally. So we have offices and headquartered in London, also in the US, across a number of geographic locations. So New York, Charlotte, and Houston, and then also in Singapore. And we've really scaled from about 20 people pre-pandemic to kind of that 120 now. So almost a 600% growth in a little bit over sort of 2 years. So yeah, very, very rapid growth.
So how do you manage that? Because that's like, holy shit, that's not like measured growth, that's exponential growth. So how have you effectively managed that without the wheels coming off?
So for us, I think it was a real choice to go fast. So Solidatus has actually been around for quite a while. So the company was founded in 2011. We self-funded through to 13 when we started to develop our software product. And then, we launched the product to general release in 2017. So we'd already been through kind of, running a company for quite a while. And so it was a specific choice to really go fast because we'd found a product market fit. We'd established that problem case. And so really then it was, how can we address the problem for more clients more quickly? And so it was by no means easy during the pandemic. At one point, I probably hadn't met in person half of the organization. That's a really strange feeling to have as a leader of a growing team. But, with being a technology-led company, with a company that was really established in that, modern era, the cloud native era, it was a lot easier than I think it could have been if we had started a few years earlier.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about that because I just had Brett Galloway on the show, and they're on like Series C, raised 75 million. I know you guys have raised around 20 million or so, but we were talking about this idea of scaling and how and sometimes, well, not sometimes, most of the time, if you say start up, we're always on this fundraising cycle at some point in the pursuit of scale, aren't we? And yet here you come along and you spent the better part of a decade bootstrapping, you know what I mean? So, and you didn't take funding. I understand, you want to hold on to that equity for as long as you can so that when you do raise, like you guys have done, you haven't diluted your ownership too much in the process of funding to scale. Were there any downsides to bootstrapping your scale?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and it's one that that we really struggled with. I think constantly was do we raise? When do we raise? Why are we raising? And I think there's upsides and downsides to every decision that you make, and I think for us, it was very much focused on we didn't want to come to market with an idea and have someone else kind of really bring that idea to fruition. We were we were engineers, and so we wanted to build, right? We wanted to build something ourselves, and we wanted to have really ownership over that direction, and to not have that vision diluted by sometimes quick wins seem really attractive, but in the long term you're not building something for a really lasting future. And we wanted to build a software company that's going to be around in 20 years, 50 years, not kind of in and out and find the next bright idea. As my kind of CTO said the other day, for first and last job is the way that he looked at us when he joined straight out of university.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we want, it seems to, I think there's this I don't know whether it's prevailing or not, but there's certainly a mindset that that I've seen where startup founders who are on this scale path or train, they feel like if they don't scale fast enough, that the opportunity won't be there. You know what I mean? For long life, which is interesting, right? Because you guys were like, no, we're going here. There's the North Star. And you spent 10 years bootstrapping that, and you were patient, which is the exact opposite of what that prevailing kind of mindset is. What's your view on scaling for the sake of being fast at scaling?
No, I mean, it's another great question. And I think, when you focus on like, we have a window and that window is closing, and for a lot of companies and a lot of kind of problems, that's really very true, right? You've got a problem which is this big, and you're really just kind of slicing up the market. Whoever gets there first is going to be the winner, right? They're going to be the one who is going forward. For us, our market kind of looks like this. It's an exponentially growing market because the data challenge that we're solving is only getting larger. So we're not trying to slice up a pie. This is a kind of a pie that is multiplying exponentially year on year. So while speed is definitely a concern because there are big market players in this space, for us it was about making sure that we had a technology which would enable us to be still viable and relevant in 5 years. Because what we'd seen is competitors who had come into the market 5-10 years earlier were now obsolete because their technology didn't really match the new expectations. So they built for the time that they saw the problem. They didn't build for the future where the problem was going to lead. So, for us, we definitely consider that time window, but we've got a couple of factors I think that are on our side in terms of that taking our time at the start. Now it's kind of all hands to the pump and scale as quickly as we can to really capture that market share, because we have the capability and product to really drive forward for the next 10-20 years.
That's a very important point, right? Because if you feel like the problem's just compounding, then in other words, it's not going away, the market opportunity is actually just getting bigger. And I suppose the idea is all boats rise with a rising tide, and if that tide keeps going up, then that's fine. There obviously the counter view as well. If you don't believe that that's the case, and there's a finite period of time for that problem to exist, given the fact that things constantly change, then that would be a consideration. In your case, though, one of the interesting data points you shared was that this issue of poor data management. You shared with me a couple of stats here, which I think our audience could benefit from. So Citibank got fined $400 million because of poor data management. Like that seems to me like a company at scale who's not getting things right, So walk us through a little bit more around the context for this. Who's getting fined? Why are they getting fined? walk us through the problem there.
Yeah, certainly. So really the regulators, I think, are responding to really I think the events of 2007, 2008, certainly in financial services, right? Where, we had a global, you know, market event where the whole world was shaken by really the inability for us to understand the connectivity of the banks, right? So this bank is trading with that bank. How much liquidity are they holding? Can they settle their debts if there was a call upon? So the regulators now just have very little trust in what we've built, and with good reason. I mean, when you look at someone like Amazon getting fined 800 million, so Citibank 400 million, Amazon 800 million for GDPR, so privacy concerns, and it's the same problem. They don't trust that they're using our data correctly. So really, what you have there is we really didn't build organizations, so these data organizations, with the thought of, we're going to have 10,000 systems. We're going to have, 50 different products, 100 different products. We're going to have 300 entities in the group. We're going to have this complexity. We built for, the old days when we had IBM and we had a couple of other systems, so we maybe had 3 or 4 systems in an organization. And really that's the challenge, right? When you don't build and design or engineer for a complex world, you can't kind of retrofit the simple into the complex. And that's really where all organizations are. So I wouldn't suggest that there'll be an organization on the planet that doesn't have data management challenges when they're at a scale, because it's not something we really thought about. We just built. We built as quick as we could. We looked at opportunities, and we went after them. That rush for opportunity. We didn't say, actually, what is this going to look like in 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where we are.
So, Philip, on the operations side of things, how have you been able to accommodate that 600% growth operationally? Because, if I added 10 people to my business, let alone what you guys have done. And the other thing that, you also mentioned to me, I think you're looking at your IT infrastructure and you're using like 50 different systems, to enable this. So it's not exactly a case of like, well, let's copy paste. It's actually quite a complex operational challenge that you overcame. So how did you overcome that so that you guys could scale to where you guys have gotten to?
Yeah, so I think the first, principle that we always kind of live by is kind of eat your own dog food. So we use our own product to make sure that we're managing, our data and our interconnection. So whether it be thinking about the systems that we have, so 50 systems sounds like a lot, but for most startups, like that's what you're going to have. You're going to have your HR system, your CRM system. You're going to have, Slack and email, and you're going to have this, SharePoint. You're going to have a myriad of different data points in the business. And unless you map and understand where those are and plan for what's coming next, then again, we're just focusing and following the same path as most of the banks. For us, as I said, the scaling was a deliberate act. And so therefore we planned for, for new functions where we didn't have functions in the past. And so that really enabled us to I think have an easier journey through it. I'm not going to say it's an easy journey, right? Growing an organization is very difficult, especially kind of during a pandemic. But I think it was made a lot easier because we were quite kind of, engineering minded in the way that we sort of constructed the business.
So I'd love to double click on that, because when you think about COVID, like a lot of companies they didn't scale, like they saw the end of the earth. And I laugh, but it's really not a laughing matter. And then it's also so interesting, like I've seen this happen where if you think of, like, I remember in South Africa, I was in South Africa at the time, and my client was Microsoft. So Microsoft, their whole thing was, Azure consumption revenue. So here's an interesting story. So when COVID happened, like everybody had to go work from home. So like Microsoft ran out of data center space in America. That's how fast they grew. That's how fast they scaled. And then, as you know, or maybe I don't know if you saw in the news or not, but Microsoft have, well, a lot of the tech companies actually have laid off 10,000 staff recently, and one of the main conduits for that is that Azure consumption revenue has fallen off a cliff, right? So they've gone through this cycle of, or COVID drove this massive consumption, and then as a consequence of that, cyclically, the market's not great, right? So we all know cost of capital is a lot higher, recession talk, etc. Not heavy, but somewhat recessive for the next 12, 18 months. And so hence all these layoffs are happening. But it's so interesting that some companies just shot the lights out, during COVID, and you were one of them. Did you anticipate that? And what have you learned about anticipating market conditions so that you can take advantage of those conditions so that you can scale?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to say yes, that we anticipated it and that, we were ready for it. No, I think like everyone, we had, we'd just taken funding. So we had a plan of execution in terms of growth, etc. But I think, as you said, that pandemic forced everyone digital, right? Everyone went from being in the office to now being at home. And so data, again, jumps up in the value stakes. So the data centers running out of space, right? People are wanting to consume because they can't use the alternative method that they may have used in the past. I'll go into the data center, I'll do something with my on-prem installation. It forced, cloud really into, I guess, another level of adoption. And so for us, people became more and more aware of, I've got people sitting at home. How are we managing and monitoring what they're doing with the data right now? Because we've got, you're no longer on a closed network system within a bank, say. You're now sitting at home, maybe on a bank laptop, maybe it's on a personal machine. And so the boundaries really changed in terms of the how we were interacting with data. So that was a driver for us to continue to grow. We didn't turn up the volume massively on our growth plan. I think there was some additional, okay, we want to go a bit faster because we're trying to keep up with demand. But I think for a lot of organizations, the pandemic was a terrible thing. But if you were in the data space, actually it was something which really drove businesses forward very quickly.
Guys, we'll be back in a moment. The Matt Brown Show is presented by Carafin, an investment bank that offers and supports direct private investments in U.S. operating companies. Over the past 20 years, investors have placed over $1.2 billion of private debt and equity in more than 100 companies through Carafin and its affiliates. Carafin leverages technology to empower its community of investors to deploy their capital far more efficiently than ever before and connects their community of engaged investors with worthy companies. Invest portions of your portfolio in direct private investments today. Visit carafin.com/Matt Brown Show for more. Philip, one of the key things you mentioned to me was that Citibank and HSBC rather are strategic investors. I found that fascinating, and it's also an interesting observation that I've had over the last 6 months or so, 7 months or so, in that a number of startup founders are actually, given the market, where it is and cost of capital and so forth, they're actually funding through strategic partnerships, which is very interesting. Farm from a Box did that. There's I think probably 6 other startups that were looking at the VC route, and they were like, this sucks. It's going to cost me too much. It's going to dilute my ownership too much. I'm not going to get the valuations that I was going to get, some time ago. And so I'm actually not going to do that at all. And I'm going to fund through strategic partnerships, which is what you've done.
Yeah, I think for us, it was really important that we struck a balance with our investors. I think, because the majority of our, experience was actually being the customer, right? So, I was within these investment banks, I was within these financial organizations and seeing their problems from the inside out. That that was really critically important to me because we wanted to stay close to the problem statement. We wanted to stay close to the people who are facing really the first wave of challenge as it arrives, right? A new regulation lands. How do they deal with that? COVID arrives. How does an organization deal with that? So we wanted to stay really close to that. And I think, following on from, I think Jeff Bezos's statement around kind of, be obsessive over the customer. That was something that really rang true with us, that we wanted to be obsessive about our customers. And so having our customers as investors really enables us to stay close to that problem and to the new problems that are coming. So they keep giving us more and more runway of ideas to follow. And so really, really critical. Now, we also went with, some venture capital because we wanted, their expertise in that scaling journey. How do we get from 20 people to 120 people? And so it was a balance of both, which was really critical for us.
Mm-hmm. That expertise bit, I want to double click on that. What have you learned about that other expertise? So what I mean is that, if you take 10 million from a venture capital firm A, and then you take it from VC firm B and C, it's still 10 million. It's the same amount of money. But the expertise bit over and above that is sometimes what makes moves your decision from B to A or from A to C. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. So what expertise did you look for specifically so that you made the right decision on which VC firm, to back or to have as an investment partner, and unpack that for us.
Yeah, certainly. So I think we were in a really, really fortunate position because of our growth from 2017, because we were sort of doubling year on year, and then we kind of went to a quadruple. We had a number of choices in terms of venture capital organizations. And so that's always nice to have a number of suitors and not just have one which, you need to be drawn towards. And then, really it becomes down to, this is a partnership, right? They're investing in us and we're investing in them. And so we really reviewed it through a number of lenses. So it needed to be someone who was there in our Series A round, that could be there in our Series B round. So someone who could follow, and that were, of course, well regarded in the industry, had a good reputation as being an organization that you would want to work with. But then you start to look at, okay, what are the challenges that I don't know about? What are the things that I haven't experienced before? Now, myself, my business partner, we'd scaled a business from, circa 5 to 110 in the services space before, but never an enterprise SaaS company. And so finding a VC who was tried and tested in the enterprise SaaS space, specifically had experience in financial services, was really important. Equally, an organization that understood that, talent and the ability to get the right talent is critical for a software business. It's not just about throwing bodies at this. This is about making sure that you're building a team of very bright but very driven individuals. So they helped us in very much in that scaling, very much in the the what to expect, where the challenges would come with enterprise SaaS. Thinking about pricing, thinking about product market fit, go to market strategy, those type of things, which obviously naturally don't come to I guess to a software engineer as out of the box. But yeah, it's been really helpful.
Or to VC firms, by the way.
Sorry?
Or to VC firms. It doesn't come naturally to them around, necessarily go to market. They're like, here's the chunk I'm getting. Here's the potential upside. Here's the money. Go and do it.
No, exactly. And I think that's it. We wanted someone who was not controlling, but there if we needed them, someone who we could, bounce ideas off and not just be a checkbook. If we just wanted a checkbook, there would have been other routes that we could have taken to get the money. We wanted, that partner, and Albion have been fantastic in the journey so far, and really enjoyed working with them. and learning from them.
Side notes, but I'm doing this series for everyone who's been following the show. Thanks, but I'm doing this series called Venture Capital Perspectives. So I'd love to talk to them and kind of maybe get the other side of the coin, because it is an interesting story, isn't it? It's like, well, there's only this startup story, but oftentimes I find like there's a bit of, I don't know, like what was the what did they look for, and so you know what I mean, like in the issuer, and so I'm really trying to unpack that for our viewers around the world, so we can get the full 360 view on like how do these sorts of deals actually go down. One of the things that I'm curious to get your view on was your expansion into North America. So congrats. I think you and I arrived around about the same time, if I remember.
Yes, so I've been boots on the ground in the US now since January last year. We already started an expansion into the US prior to me arriving and kind of, I guess, setting up the headquarters. But yeah, we've kind of been here for about the same time, I think.
So love to get your view on North America. Massive markets. You're not here for a haircut. So, and it's why I'm here. Like I said up front, I think like I was always doing the right thing in the wrong country, and now I'm here. And it's this massive market. It's also more competitive. It's not as simple as copy paste. It's a different thing. States are different. Over indexing in New York, as for financial services. Type companies. Most 60% of the funded startups and scale ups in America are in California, dude. Like that's just one state. And I think there's this I don't know whether it's right or wrong necessarily, but there's certainly this idea that, well, if I'm sitting in Israel and I am Lucia, they provide data intelligence solutions. I spoke to the CMO there, and they were like, "Yo, we want to come to, into North America, and we want to take out Zoom Info." And I'm like, "Cool. So how are you going to do that?" It's an interesting question, right? And so from your perspective, Philip, when you were expanding into North America, boots on the ground, we're going to invade, get a beachhead and so forth, what considerations did you take into account to ensure that you would be successful? Were you looking at, we don't care where these businesses are, or did you choose a particular state? Like walk us through what went down in your world.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's one that we spent a lot of time thinking about because everyone kind of says, oh, the US is a massive market, and it's not. It's massive markets, right? As you said, California is its own market, New York is its own market. So each of the states are their own market. Now, yes, they operate kind of unitedly in some ways, but they have such nuance to them and such diversity across them that if you come in and think this is going to be the same as landing in the UK and kind of headquartering in London and everything is kind of, really very, very similar, you're completely wrong, right? The state you pick, the time zone that you sit in, all of these things really impact your ability to do business. So we spent a lot of time kind of US map out and going, right, where do we go? Naturally, we're pulled to New York because we have a financial services bend, but we're one of 10,000 startups in New York. New York doesn't care. The cost of growth in New York is really high. If we want to grow a 300-400 person organization in Manhattan, what's that look like against my burn? Okay, so New York. What else looks like New York? So of course, East Coast is where you start because unfortunately in B2B, especially where you're focused in very large financial services or healthcare, oil and gas type markets, the West Coast wakes up when everybody else is finishing their day. So that excluded the West Coast for us. I mean, sunshine great, beach is great, fantastic. Maybe after we exit, but at the moment we really needed to be closer to the world. And so then you start looking, okay, do we look at Florida? Do we look at Denver? Do we look at Chicago? And so we started to do that process and pros and cons for each. And what we got to is we wanted a state that really backed people who were proud to set up in that state. So Texas is all about Texas. Texas will support Texas. So that was really nice. Immediately we came down, the Greater Houston Partnership, the Houston Exponential, already started networking with us, pushing us into both clients and partners. So fantastic to have that kind of, reception. Cost of doing business in the States, a really business friendly state from a tax perspective. It's well positioned time zone wise. It's connected to the world with a single flight, both internal US, externally to the world. One of the most multicultural cities in the world. Diversity. You've got tech here. You've got innovation here. You've got the NASA's. You've got the the medical center. So you've got the ecosystem that is going to be there to help support you. So for us, it was a really well thought out process. And even when you kind of go through that process, you arrive and it's like, oh wow, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that. So you still have to come across these challenges, but I think really understand what you're getting yourself into. The US is very different than kind of trying to grow into Singapore, right? We expanded into Singapore. That was a fairly easy path because you're dealing with a singular. If you're kind of focused against multiple markets, very, very different.
Cool. So, Philip, one of the key things I've been observing, I was doing all these series last year, like built in Texas, New York, and these sorts of things. And interesting observation from my side was that in Texas, there's a surprising over-index towards startups who are in the medtech, healthcare, biopharma. Like, it's ridiculous. And I asked a few of the founders, like, why is that? Why do you think that there's so many of those types of startups in that state? Whereas in New York, you might find that, it over-indexes towards fintech startups, whereas California, it's like super crazy ideas, One of the a few things some of the founders said is like, if you go to a VC in California and you tell him you want to, colonize Venus, you have more probability of someone believing you, in California than you would in like Colorado, for instance, where I'm at. So I'm curious to get your view, Philip. I know you thought through this thing, but this ecosystem idea, like we hear about it, like it's the role of the ecosystem to facilitate successful scale-ups, and blah, blah, blah. And like when interesting story, we won Africa's Best Tech Startup and, we flew to London for London Tech Week and the UK government rolled out the red carpet for all these startups and that. It was a really impressive thing, to see the ecosystem of the UK government coming to the table and going, yo, like we want you to come and set up offices here because we want to offset the GDP impact of leaving the euro and blah. They didn't say that, but everyone knew that. And so there's like this ecosystem, we have the most amazing ecosystem. So I'm curious to get your view. Texas ecosystem, is it really a thing? Like, and how important has it been from a strategic perspective to reach the kind of scale that you guys have reached?
Yeah, I think ecosystem is really important, but as you said, it can be a bit of a kind of a buzzword. I mean, what is really nice, I think, is when you see an ecosystem which isn't really just talk. It's a lot around action. People that are really keen to engage and to be engaged because having access to the problem statement. So Texas with the medical centers, of course, you've got access to them, but only if they want to interact with you, right? If just because you've got the biggest medical center in the world, if they're not open for business, then there's no point kind of geolocating near them. And so you've got to have that openness. And I think for what we've certainly found is there is really that openness to engage. So we landed on the ground and immediately you're meeting people from the medical center, from Exxon or from Chevron, BP, etc. And you're also being introduced to super regional banks and insurance companies. So for us, it was great to see that the ecosystem was vibrant, that there was investors here, that there was startups here, that there was the clients here. And I think that varies, of course, state by state. I think where you've got really, really established markets like that, I mentioned kind of New York. you become a tiny fish in a huge pond, right? If you're doing several billion, yeah, of course you're a darling. But if you're, if you're still in Series A to Series B, there's hundreds, there's thousands of those, and so the ecosystem, I think, would need to be much, much stronger to be able to support all those in the same way that an ecosystem that is really kind of emerging is able to do.
Got you. Got you. So I want to have a bit of fun with you, Philip, for a moment. So basically, I'm going to give you the keys to the Matt Brown Show time machine, right? And if you could go back to yourself, like on day one, like before you were funded, before you had scale, all that stuff, what advice would you give yourself about scaling Solidatus? What advice would that be?
Yeah. What would we go back and tell myself? I think for me, the most important thing I think that we've learned along the way is the importance of people. I think, the individuals that make up the organization, getting the fit right, getting the culture right, getting the right stakeholders, the right leadership is really the critical, one of the most critical things. Because if you, and all startups do, make false starts, you hire someone expecting them to be great, and they might be great, but just not great in a Series A startup. Like, really, that stage appropriateness of people is really, really important. And really kind of bringing people on the journey. I think communication is another thing that I think I would have liked to really have improved early on. I think it's really easy to forget that everyone doesn't know what you know. So a group of people might have a collective knowledge, but making sure that collective knowledge is spread across the organization so that everyone is, beating to the same drum is really, really kind of critical. And I think that's the bit where I'd probably go back and say, hey, focus a bit more on these things, because this is where you're going to get efficiency. This is where you're going to make up time that other fintechs who don't focus on it so much are going to spend more time. And yeah, I think those two are the critical pieces.
Cool. I want to double click on that, but we need to take a quick break. Scale your business with your own AI-powered digital marketing assistant. Sign up today and get $250 of your first month's ad spend back. Check out meetotis.com/rapid returns for more. Raising money for your startup? Well, why don't you close your next funding round fast? Get investor-focused media and FaceTime with relevant investors in days. Visit showworksmedia.com for more. That's showworks with an X, media.com. Gotta love sponsors. Damn. So I'm curious about this idea. I quite like this idea where when you were talking about the stage appropriateness of people, because, to your point, and this is my mentor, he owns like hundreds of businesses, and he explained this idea of, like, I think there were three numbers. One was 15, 50, and then 150, and then there was like 300. So you're at like this 150 level. And he was saying that, when the first 15 people, like when you start to scale and you bring in middle management and, like you're saying, like different stage, different people, what happens is that the initial startup group, and this is what happened in my company too, they start to become disillusioned with the culture. They're like, no, we want it to go back the way that it was. I don't want to do reports. I don't want to, be told what to do. I want to be doing two things. I don't want to have to report to anyone. This sucks. And so so you start to have this attrition rate in terms of your people. And then and the idea is that you get to 50 people, different types of leaders. Then you get to 100. Now that's a different type of leader even again. And 300 is also, a different type of leader. So you're almost replacing your entire, well, a lot, I would say, at least half. You would replace at least half of your people at each stage so that they're appropriate for the business at that stage. Would you agree that has kind of been potentially the kind of journey experience that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, top of my head, I don't have kind of exact numbers. I think the thing that we really try, and I try and make sure kind of, across the organization people are aware of is, we can't guarantee much, but I can guarantee that we will be going through constant change. Change will be ever with us, right? We're a scale up, we're a startup. We're not going to be 20 people kind of in a small office, everyone knowing everyone's business, everyone doing multiple jobs, everyone kind of, digging into the problems that arise. You've got to understand that if we want to get to, the destination, that we have to evolve, and change is difficult, but if you embrace it and if you're open to it, then I think you get a much lower attrition rate. So really, we've been very lucky in terms of a lot of the people that were at the start of the journey are still with us on the journey. And I say lucky because I hear this a lot from kind of other founders that they've had to really change a lot of the staff because the people wanted it to stay like it was. We're fortunate we've got a very young organization that is I guess more adept at change, and then we've got kind of almost at the other end of the spectrum kind of a very experienced set who they've seen every other business at every other stage, and so they're cool with like that things are a little bit kind of ad hoc and rocky at times, and so it is a challenge. It is a challenge for sure. I'm not going to say that it's not. I think you've really got to push that. Look, as long as we're good with change, as long as we're happy, as long as we communicate, we can kind of move forward. Now, for obviously, sometimes it's not for everybody, but you hope that they understand that that's the bit that they're really good at, and that we're now no longer in that bit, and so you move on to the next bit, and you get other individuals who are really good at that bit, and then hopefully you move on to the next bit, and along the way, hopefully everyone has a fantastic experience.
Philip, tell me how. So, before I answer this question, the premise here for this question is a business can only scale to the extent that you do, meaning you need to grow to a certain level to accommodate that next scale of growth. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much you raise. You know what I mean? You're just going to get replaced and kumbaya. So, I'm curious to ask you this. How have you changed in this journey of scaling Solid Datas? Is there something that comes to mind? Well, I really sucked at this, and then I became this. Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think you're 100% right. It's something that all of the the leaders in the business who have been there from the start really need to embrace is, I need to change, I need to keep iterating, and I need to keep improving. And sometimes it is difficult because you've got what you're really good at and what you're comfortable in. And so for me, I think that some of that value that I was talking about with the VCs is them pushing, like, you need to get some mentoring in this. You need to focus more of your time and energy on this because you need to evolve. We need you to evolve. And so for me, there's things which, of course, I used to love to do. I love solving problems. I love being into the detail and working out how you can unlock something which might seem unlockable or ununlockable. And so realizing that actually, no, I need to step back and not be into all of the details, that I need to be looking at what's the vision, what's the future, where's the strategy, where is the next big systemic risk coming from. That's really, I think, for me, where I've really learned to pull back and really encourage the leadership team that we've established to take ownership of their areas and to be responsible for their areas, and not feel like I have to be responsible for everything, which is often, I think, a difficult thing for founders to do, to pull back and say, this is yours, you go and take ownership of it.
Philip, let's wrap this up. One more question for you. What's your advice to a founder and he's thinking about, yeah, man, I'm going to become a unicorn. He's probably 30 years old and thinks he can walk on water. What's your advice to that person, him or her?
I'd say, like, believe in yourself. If you truly believe that you have an idea that can you know, take a company to become a unicorn status, then I say, believe in it, and then roll up your sleeves and work as hard as you absolutely need to make that happen. There is no easy in startup. There is no kind of magic bullet. It's yes, a lot of very, very smart work, but there's a lot of very, very hard work as well. So,
Just don't
but
kill
go up.
yourself. Be
No, no.
kind to yourself too.
Yeah, no, look, I think the thing for me is wherever I've worked where it was really difficult, it's always been the most rewarding. It's always been where I've learnt the most. So the difficulty shouldn't just be a difficult and something you don't enjoy. You should be able to see that I'm evolving and I'm growing as a person because of challenge, because of the diversity that I'm faced against. So no, if it's not fun, if you don't want to get out of bed before your alarm goes off, you're not in the right place. So yeah, make sure if your alarm goes off and you're still asleep, you're probably not where you need to be.
Awesome, Philip. Well, look, it's been a real privilege having you on the show, dude. And yeah, man, congrats on all your success, man. I think it's great to have another Antipodean here, that's for sure. And I'll definitely look you up when I'm in Texas. And if you're ever out and come for a ski trip, bring the family and that. Let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Matt. I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and yeah, I mean, hopefully we can continue to be on that journey to unicorn status.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everyone. Ciao.
Right.